Welcome back, everyone, to The Deep Dive. You know, we love to get into the nitty-gritty of all sorts of things here, and today we're diving deep into a topic that's been getting a lot of buzz lately, and something I know you've been looking into quite a bit, mastering emotions.
And you know me always up for a good deep dive,
Yeah,
especially into something as complex and fascinating as our emotions.
absolutely. And to guide us through this exploration, we're going to be using the book Master Your Emotions.
Yeah, a really interesting read with a lot of practical insights.
For sure. Our mission today, if you choose to accept it, is to really distill the essence of how our emotions work and maybe even more importantly, how we can learn to navigate them in a way that actually empowers us rather than leaves us feeling totally overwhelmed.
Because let's face it, emotions can be pretty intense sometimes, right?
No kidding. I mean, have you ever felt like your emotions were just totally running the show? Like, you're not really in control?
Or maybe you've wondered why some feelings just seem to stick around no matter what you do.
Totally. Those are exactly the kinds of questions we're going to be tackling today.
So buckle up and get ready for a deep dive into the world of emotions.
Okay, let's get started by talking about something really fundamental to our human experience, our survival instincts. The author makes this really cool point right at the beginning. The fact that you're here, listening to this right now, means that your ancestors managed to survive and reproduce against some pretty incredible odds. We're talking thousands of years of dodging saber-toothed tigers, famines, plagues, you name it.
You're a statistical miracle.
You're real.
And that deep-rooted drive for survival, it's not just some ancient history. It has profoundly shaped our brains, our behaviors, and how we respond to the world around us. One of the most interesting outcomes of this survival programming is something called the negativity bias.
Okay, negativity bias. Interesting. So tell me more about that.
Well, it basically means that our brains are wired to pay more attention to negative information than positive information. It's like we're Velcro for bad news and Teflon for good news.
I like that analogy. And the book gives this great example. Like, imagine an author who gets dozens of glowing reviews for their book, but then there's that one really harsh critique.
Yeah. Which one do you think sticks with them?
Probably the negative one?
Right. It can feel like that one negative comment just wipes out all those positive ones. And it's not because we're masochists or anything.
No, definitely not.
It's because our ancestors, who were more attuned to potential dangers, they were the ones who were more likely to survive and pass on their genes.
So being super aware of threats was actually a really good thing back then.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Our brains haven't quite caught up to the fact that most of us aren't facing life or death situations on a daily basis.
Right, we're not running from predators or struggling to find food.
But our brains still operate with that ancient programming. So even minor setbacks or perceived threats can trigger that same intense survival response. Like, let's say you lose your job. Logically, you might know that you have skills and experience. You'll likely find another one.
But your mind can go to some pretty dark places. Oh, for sure. Like, what if I can't find another job? What if I can't pay my bills? What if I end up homeless? All these catastrophic thoughts swirling around.
And all that fear and anxiety, even though the situation might not be as dire as our minds are making it out to be.
Exactly. So the key insight here, and one of the first steps in mastering your emotions, is learning to distinguish between genuine life-threatening situations and those that are more about perceived threats created by our own minds.
So it's about recognizing when our survival instincts are kicking in, even when there's no real danger.
Exactly. And separating those real threats from the imaginary ones can save you a lot of unnecessary stress and emotional turmoil.
All right, so we've got our survival mechanisms and that negativity bias. Now let's talk about another big player in the world of emotions, dopamine.
Oh yeah, dopamine, the feel-good neurotransmitter. It gets a lot of attention these days.
It does. We often hear about it in relation to things like pleasure and reward.
Yeah.
Those good feelings we get from exercise or a delicious meal. But dopamine, it's not just about seeking pleasure. Its roots go much deeper. Originally, dopamine played a crucial role in our survival.
How so?
Well, think about it. Our ancestors needed to be motivated to seek out essential things like food, water, and mates. Dopamine was the driving force behind that motivation, ensuring the continuation of the species.
So it's basically the reward system that kept us going.
Exactly. But here's where things get really interesting.
Uh-oh. I sense a but coming.
Well, the world we live in today is vastly different from the one our ancestors evolved in. And in our modern environment, Dopamine can be triggered in all sorts of ways that have nothing to do with survival.
Like, give me some examples.
Think about all the things that give us those quick hits of dopamine. Social media notifications, constantly checking our phones,
No.
online shopping, binge-watching shows, even things like gambling.
Oh, yeah, I can definitely see how those things can become addictive. It's like you're always chasing that next little dopamine rush.
And that's exactly the point. These artificial triggers, they can really hijack our natural reward system, leading us down a path of seeking constant stimulation and instant gratification.
And it's not just about those obvious addictions either.
Right. The author talks about how we can even be addicted to thinking.
Addicted to thinking.
Yeah, like constantly seeking out mental stimulation. Even if it's not necessarily productive or beneficial, it's like our minds become hooked on that dopamine rush, even if it comes from ruminating on negative thoughts or worrying about things we can't control.
Wow, I never thought of it that way. And the research mentioned in the book, the one from Tulane University, where participants chose to stimulate their brain's pleasure centers over basic needs like food, that's
Right. Dopamine triggers can be, even overriding our fundamental survival instincts in some cases.
And then there's that tragic example of Lee Sung-sup, the guy who died after playing video games for days straight.
Yeah, a really sad and extreme case that shows how far this can go.
Definitely a wake-up call. So the question for all of us is, are we really aware of our own dopamine triggers? And it's not just about those obvious addictions like drugs or alcohol.
It's about those subtle things too, like how much time we spend on our phones, how often we check social media, what kinds of content we're consuming, even how we think. Are we constantly seeking out that next dopamine hit, or are we finding ways to experience genuine, sustainable happiness?
Food for thought, for sure.
It's an ongoing process, this journey of understanding our own dopamine patterns and learning to distinguish those artificial highs from real, lasting fulfillment.
Okay, so we've talked about survival instincts, negativity bias, and the complexities of dopamine. Now let's dive into this idea that so many of us hold on to, the one day I will myth. You know, that belief that happiness is just around the corner waiting for us once we achieve that next big goal, get that promotion, find that perfect partner.
Oh yeah, the classic, when I finally have fill in the blank, then I'll be happy.
Exactly. But the book throws a bit of a wrench in that idea by introducing the concept of hedonic adaptation.
Which basically means that we humans, we're incredibly adaptable creatures.
We are.
We get used to new situations, both good and bad, much faster than we might expect. So that new car, that dream vacation, that promotion we've been working so hard for, they might bring an initial surge of happiness, but that feeling often fades much quicker than we'd like.
Like the novelty wears off.
Yeah, and we return to a sort of baseline level of happiness.
And the study from 1978, the one with the lottery winners and the people who had become paraplegic, that's pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, I mean, imagine winning the lottery. That's like the ultimate dream for so many people.
You'd think that would bring lasting happiness, right?
You'd think so. But the study found that after about a year, both the lottery winners and the people who had experienced this major life-altering event, they tended to return to their previous levels of happiness.
So it suggests that those external events, even the really big ones, they don't have as much of a long-term impact on our happiness as we might believe.
And Thibaut Meurisse, a researcher who studies happiness, her work adds another layer to this. She proposes that about 50% of our happiness is influenced by our genetics, like our inherent disposition.
So part of it is just built in.
Right. And then about 40% comes from our internal state, our thoughts, our beliefs, our attitudes, and our behaviors.
So that's a pretty big chunk that we actually have some control over.
Exactly. And then only about 10% is determined by those external circumstances, the things that happen to us.
So it's not about waiting for that external change to make us happy.
It's much more about cultivating that internal sense of well-being, that inner peace that's not so dependent on those external ups and downs.
Right. That's a powerful message for sure. Now let's talk about the ego. And when we say ego here, we're not just talking about someone being arrogant or self-centered.
Right, it's a much broader concept than that.
The book describes the ego as our sense of self-identity, the me that we've constructed through our thoughts and experiences. It's like the internal narrator of our lives, constantly telling a story about who we are.
And it's a story that we often take very seriously.
We do. We get really attached to this idea of ourselves, to our beliefs, our values, our possessions, even our problems.
And here's the thing. The ego, it's not inherently bad. It serves a purpose. It helps us navigate the world, make decisions, and interact with others.
Right. It's part of what makes us human.
But it can also create a lot of suffering when we become overly identified with it, when we believe that this story it's telling us is the absolute truth of who we are.
And what's interesting is that this sense of self, this ego, it's largely a construct of the mind.
Yeah, it's built from our thoughts, our interpretations, our memories, and our beliefs.
In events themselves, they're often neutral, but we assign meaning to them based on our own personal perspective and the story our ego is telling us.
Like, imagine someone cuts you off in traffic.
Ugh, I hate when that happens.
The event itself is just a car changing lanes. But your ego might jump in and start creating a story about it.
Oh yeah, like, that guy's a jerk. He did that on purpose to disrespect me.
Exactly. And suddenly you're feeling angry and frustrated, all because of the story your ego is weaving around a neutral event.
And that's happening all the time, right? With all sorts of things.
All the time. We're constantly interpreting events through the filter of our ego, and that creates our emotional experience.
So the key here is to start recognizing that our ego, this self-constructed sense of identity, it's not the enemy, but it's also not the absolute truth of who we are.
And it's not always looking out for our best interests. It's primarily concerned with its own survival, with protecting and reinforcing that sense of self.
And one of the ways it does that is by attaching itself to things, people, and beliefs.
Oh yeah, the ego loves to cling to anything that makes it feel more real, more important, more special.
And the book gives all sorts of examples, like physical possessions. Those are a big one.
Oh, for sure. The author suggests that consumerism, on some level, is a reflection of our collective ego.
Like, we're constantly bombarded with messages telling us that we need to buy this or that product to be happy, to be successful, to be loved.
And our egos eat it up. We start to believe that those external things can actually define us.
But they can't.
Right. They might bring temporary satisfaction, but true fulfillment, it comes from within.
And then there's our physical appearance. So many people, especially in today's image-obsessed culture, they tie their self-worth to how they look.
And the ego loves that. It loves to compare, to judge, to find flaws.
The book makes a really interesting point. You can observe your body without necessarily identifying as it.
It's a subtle but important distinction.
Like, you can appreciate your body for what it is, for its strength, its beauty, its ability to move and experience the world.
But you don't have to believe that your worth is solely determined by your physical appearance.
Exactly. And our relationships, they're another fertile ground for the ego to plant its roots.
Oh yeah, the ego is all about what it can get from others. Validation, approval, attention, love, even control.
And sometimes it can create some pretty unhealthy dynamics.
Like in parent-child relationships, for example.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
The author talks about how some parents, often unconsciously, view their children as extensions of themselves.
Like they're trying to live vicariously through their kids, pushing them to achieve the things they themselves may have missed out on.
Exactly. Or they become overly invested in their children's success, needing them to be a certain way to make themselves feel good.
Like those parents who are screaming from the sidelines at their kids' soccer games, living and dying with every play.
Yeah, that can be the ego in action.
And then there are our beliefs, whether they're religious, political, or just personal opinions.
The ego loves to identify with beliefs because it makes it feel like it has the answers, like it knows the truth.
And when those beliefs are challenged, the ego can get really defensive.
Oh yeah, because it feels like an attack on its sense of self.
And it can lead to all sorts of arguments, conflict, and even violence in extreme cases.
So it's important to remember that our beliefs, they're just thoughts.
They're not who we are.
And they can change over time as we learn and grow.
And the book gives this whole laundry list of other things that the ego commonly identifies with.
It's like a never-ending list.
Like our name, our gender, our nationality, our culture, our family history, our personal story, even our problems.
The ego will latch on to anything that makes it feel more solid, more defined.
And one of its main characteristics is this tendency to equate having with being.
Like the more stuff we have, the more successful we are, the more attractive we are, the more worthy we are as human beings.
And it's constantly comparing, isn't it?
Oh yeah, comparison is the ego's bread and butter.
It's never satisfied with what it has. It always wants more, always wants to be better than someone else.
And that leads to this constant feeling of not being enough.
And its sense of self-worth becomes totally dependent on external validation, on what other people think.
It needs that constant approval to feel okay, to feel worthy.
And all of this, it leads to the ego's deep-seated need to feel superior.
The ego is always trying to find ways to separate itself, to elevate itself above others.
And it does that through all sorts of strategies.
Like name dropping, associating with successful people, trying to one-up others, putting others down, gossiping.
And always needing to be right.
Oh yeah, the ego hates to be wrong. It feels like a threat to its existence.
So how does all this ego stuff actually impact our emotions?
Well, the book argues that strong identification with all these things, with people, with possessions, with beliefs, with our story, that's at the root of a lot of our emotional suffering.
Like we get upset when things don't go our way, when people don't meet our expectations, when our beliefs are challenged.
Exactly, because the ego takes it personally. It feels like a threat to its sense of self.
And it reacts with all sorts of negative emotions:
Yeah.
fear, anger, jealousy, sadness, resentment.
And the key here, and this is a big takeaway, is that a lot of our emotional responses, they're not actually based on reality.
They're based on our ego's interpretation of reality.
And that interpretation is often distorted, filtered through all those insecurities and fears and attachments.
So it's not about trying to eliminate the ego, because that's probably not possible.
Right, it's about becoming aware of it, understanding its patterns, and learning to detach from its constant need for validation and control.
And that's when we can start to experience more peace, more joy, more genuine connection.
Exactly. We can start to respond to life from a place of wisdom and compassion, rather than reacting from a place of fear and insecurity.
Now, the book makes a really important point that I think is worth emphasizing. Experiencing negative emotions is not a bad thing.
No, it's part of being human.
We all feel them. It's unavoidable.
And trying to suppress them or pretend they don't exist, that actually makes things worse.
It does. The real suffering, it comes not from the emotions themselves, but from our resistance to them, from the stories we tell ourselves about them.
Like we might feel sad after a breakup, and that's perfectly natural. But then our ego jumps in and starts telling us, see, you're not good enough, you're unlovable, you'll never find anyone else. And that's when the real pain starts.
It's like we add insult to injury.
Exactly. So the key here is to allow ourselves to feel those emotions, to acknowledge them without judgment, and to understand that they're temporary,
No pass.
just like everything else in life.
Now, let's talk about something that can have a huge impact on our emotional state: the filtering power of our emotions.
What do you mean by filtering power?
Well, the book talks about how our current emotional state can dramatically influence how we perceive the world and how we act within it.
Yeah.
It's like we're wearing a different pair of glasses depending on how we're feeling.
Oh yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Like when I'm feeling happy and optimistic, everything just seems brighter, easier, more possible.
Exactly. It's like you have more energy, more confidence, more openness to new experiences.
And on the flip side, when I'm feeling down or stressed, it's like everything is filtered through this lens of negativity.
It can feel like you're stuck in a rut.
Totally. It's harder to focus, harder to be productive, harder to see the good in things.
And the author gives this great example from their own life, talking about how their experiences with their online business were totally different depending on their emotional state.
Like the same challenges, the same opportunities, they were perceived and responded to in completely different ways depending on whether they were feeling excited and motivated or discouraged and overwhelmed.
It's like our emotions are creating our reality.
To a large extent, they are.
So the key takeaway here is to be aware of how our emotions are influencing our perceptions and our actions.
And to try and cultivate a more positive emotional state as much as possible.
Because that's when we're more likely to make good decisions, to attract positive experiences, to create the life we want.
Exactly. It's not about denying or suppressing negative emotions, but it's about recognizing their power and consciously choosing to focus on the positive as much as we can.
Now, have you ever tried to force yourself to feel happy when you're really feeling down?
Oh yeah, I've definitely been there. And it usually doesn't work very well.
It feels fake.
Totally. And the book talks about why that is, introducing the idea of emotional ranges and something called the emotional ladder.
Emotional ladder, interesting.
Yeah, it's this model that suggests our emotions exist on a spectrum, from low-energy emotions like sadness and despair to high-energy emotions like joy and excitement.
And moving from one end of the spectrum to the other, it's not always a direct leap.
Right. Sometimes we need to take smaller steps.
So if you're feeling really down, it might not be realistic to try and jump straight to feeling ecstatic.
Exactly. It might be more helpful to focus on moving to an emotion that's slightly higher up the ladder, even if it's still a negative emotion.
Like anger, for example.
Yeah, anger can actually be a step in the right direction sometimes because it has more energy associated with it than sadness or depression.
So it's about recognizing where you are on that emotional scale and finding a realistic next step.
And being patient with yourself. It's a process.
All right, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the connection between our emotions and mental suffering.
Ooh, that's a big one.
The book makes a strong case that a lot of the pain we experience, it's not actually caused by external events,
It's caused by our own minds.
by our thoughts, our beliefs, our interpretations, our reactions.
Like, imagine you stub your toe. The initial pain, that's physical. But then your mind might jump in and start creating a whole story about it.
Oh yeah, like, this is gonna ruin my whole day. I'm so clumsy. Why does this always happen to me?
And suddenly the pain is amplified, not by the physical sensation itself, but by all the mental chatter around it.
And it's not just physical pain either. We do this with all sorts of things.
We worry about the future, we ruminate on the past, we create problems that don't even exist.
And all of that mental activity, it creates a lot of unnecessary suffering.
And the book gives this great example of procrastination. The task itself, it might not be that difficult.
But all the time we spend worrying about it, dreading it, feeling guilty about not doing it, that's what really drains us.
And that quote from Dr. Brill, the one about how 100% of fatigue in sedentary workers is psychological or emotional, that's pretty mind-blowing.
It is. It suggests that a lot of the exhaustion we feel, it's not actually from physical exertion. It's from mental and emotional stress.
So the key insight here is that we have a lot more control over our suffering than we might realize.
It's not about trying to eliminate negative thoughts or emotions altogether, because that's probably impossible.
It's about learning to observe them, to detach from them, and to choose not to get swept away by the stories our minds are telling us.
And the book even takes this a step further, suggesting that problems don't actually exist.
Now, that's a bold statement.
It is. But the idea is that a problem only exists when we focus on it and label it as such.
Like if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound?
It's kind of like that.
If we don't give a situation our attention and our mental energy, if we don't define it as a problem, then from our perspective, it doesn't really exist,
And most of the things we worry about, they're either in the past or the future.
which are just constructs of our minds.
The present moment, that's all we really have.
And in this moment, right now, is there actually a problem?
Good question.
It's something to ponder.
Now, let's talk about something very practical that has a huge impact on our emotional state, sleep.
Ah, sleep. The foundation of a good life.
The book really emphasizes how important sleep is for our emotional well-being.
And it's not just about feeling tired or groggy.
Right. When we're sleep deprived, our ability to regulate our emotions, it goes way down.
We get more irritable, more reactive, more easily stressed.
And it's harder to experience positive emotions.
It's like our emotional bandwidth is reduced.
And the research on this is pretty clear. Studies have shown that people who consistently get less than 6 hours of sleep are more likely to experience anxiety and depression.
And there's even a higher risk of mortality associated with chronic sleep deprivation.
So it's not just about feeling good, it's about our overall health and well-being.
And the book gives some great tips for improving sleep.
Light.
Well, creating a relaxing bedtime routine, avoiding caffeine and alcohol before bed, making sure your bedroom is dark and cool, and trying to stick to a consistent sleep schedule even on weekends.
And if your sleep gets disrupted, taking short naps can be helpful.
The key is to prioritize sleep and make it a non-negotiable part of your routine.
Okay, we've talked about the mind and the importance of sleep. Now let's look at how we can actually use our physical bodies to influence our emotions.
Because it's not just a one-way street.
Right. Our mind affects our body, but our body also affects our mind.
And the book talks about how our posture and body language can actually change how we feel.
Like if you stand up straight with your shoulders back, you're more likely to feel confident and powerful.
Yeah, and if you slouch with your head down, you're more likely to feel depressed and anxious.
And it's not just about how it makes us feel, it also affects how others perceive us.
Like, if you walk into a room with your head held high, people are more likely to see you as confident and competent.
And there's this fascinating experiment by David K. Reynolds where he actually induced feelings of depression in himself by intentionally adopting a depressed posture and engaging in negative self-talk.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
It really highlights how powerful that mind-body connection is.
And when it came to shifting out of that depressed state, what was one of the key things that helped him?
Exercise.
Exactly. He had to force himself to get moving, even when he didn't feel like it.
And that physical activity, it helped to shift his mood, to lift his spirits.
And there's a ton of research that backs this up. Studies have shown that exercise is as effective as antidepressants for mild to moderate depression.
And it helps to prevent relapse, too.
And it's not just about depression. Exercise has all sorts of benefits for our mental and emotional health.
It reduces stress, it improves sleep, it boosts our mood, it increases our energy levels, it helps us focus. It even makes us more resilient in the face of challenges.
And it doesn't have to be some crazy intense workout either.
Right. Even just going for a walk every day can make a big difference.
So, get moving, people. Your mind and body will thank you.
Now, another interesting technique the book talks about is visualization.
Oh yeah, I love visualization.
The idea is that our subconscious mind, it doesn't always distinguish between real experiences and imagined ones.
So if we vividly imagine ourselves feeling happy and confident, our brain actually starts to believe it's real.
And that can start to create those feelings in our actual experience.
It's like planting seeds in our subconscious mind.
So if you want to feel more confident, you can visualize yourself speaking up in a meeting, nailing a presentation, or asking someone out on a date.
And the more you do it, the more real it feels, and the more likely you are to actually do those things in real life.
It's like practicing in your mind.
Exactly. And it works for all sorts of things.
Now let's move from the physical to the verbal, the power of our words.
Our words have so much power.
They do. The book talks about how the words we use, they can both reflect and reinforce our emotional state.
Like, if we're constantly using negative self-talk, putting ourselves down, saying things like, I'm so stupid, or I can't do anything right.
That's just going to make us feel worse.
Exactly. But if we start to use more positive and empowering language, speaking to ourselves with kindness and encouragement, that can start to shift our mindset and our emotions.
And this is where affirmations come in.
Oh yeah, affirmations. I'm a big believer in affirmations.
The idea is that by repeating positive statements to ourselves, we can start to reprogram our subconscious mind.
And the book gives some great tips for creating effective affirmations.
Like?
Well, they should be in the present tense, like I am confident or I am worthy.
And they should avoid negative phrasing.
Right. So instead of saying I'm not afraid, you would say, I am courageous.
And it's important to repeat them regularly.
Consistency is key. The more you say them, the more you start to believe them.
And try to visualize the affirmation as you're saying it. Really feel the emotion behind it.
And Tony Robbins, he takes this a step further with his incantation technique.
Oh yeah, tell me about that.
It's basically a combination of positive affirmations, physical movement, and strong emotion.
So you're not just saying the words, you're really embodying them.
Exactly. It's about creating a state of certainty and conviction.
Now let's talk about something we do all the time without even thinking about it. Our breath.
Breath is life.
It is, and the book explains how our breathing patterns have a direct impact on our emotional state.
Like if we're feeling anxious or stressed, we tend to take short, shallow breaths.
And that actually perpetuates the anxiety.
It does. But if we consciously slow down our breathing, taking deep, full breaths, that can help to calm our nervous system and reduce those feelings of stress.
And there are all sorts of different breathing techniques that can be really helpful for managing our emotions.
Like alternate nostril breathing, which is really good for balancing the nervous system.
And box breathing, which is great for calming the mind and improving focus.
And the breath of fire, which is a more energizing technique that can help to release stress and increase alertness.
So breathing, it's a powerful tool that we have available to us all the time.
And it's free.
No excuses.
Breathe your way to emotional well-being.
Now, our external environment, that plays a role in our emotions too, doesn't it?
Oh, for sure. Our surroundings can have a big impact on how we feel.
Like if our home or workspace is cluttered and chaotic, that can make us feel stressed and overwhelmed.
Yeah, and spending time in nature, being around trees and plants, that can have a really calming effect.
And the people we surround ourselves with, they matter too.
Absolutely. If we're constantly around negative and draining people, that's going to bring us down.
But if we're surrounded by positive and supportive people, that's going to lift us up.
So choose your company wisely.
And the media we consume, that has an influence as well.